20 years ago, Brighton almost went out of extinction, but fast forward to current day, they are in the Premier League, they are challenging for Europe, and they have got some quality players. So, how did they get there? Firstly, we have to go all the way back to 1997, in the old third division, which is the equivalent of League 2 today, to the fourth tier of English football. On the final day of the season, Brighton needed to avoid a defeat against Hereford at home. If they lost this game, they would be out of the league and they would drop into non-league football. They ended up 1-0 down after 20 minutes, but scored a scrappy goal through Robbie Reinell. They clung on for a 1-1 draw and secured professional league football for another season. This was a real turning point for Brighton, as they'd had financial troubles all throughout the 90s, and they even sold their ground to developers in 1995 with the intention of demolishing the ground. With no other ground readily available, the FA had to step in and save Brighton, and they blocked the developers from demolishing the ground. And this ultimately saved the club. And then after many years of bouncing around between the third and fourth tier, Brighton finally made it to the second tier of English football with a back-to-back promotion in 2001 and 2002. And they had a young Bobby Zamora being top scorer in both seasons, scoring 31 and 32 goals respectively. I really hate that man. He ruined my childhood. A few more promotions and subsequent relegations meant Brighton became sort of a yo-yo club, similar to how Norwich and Fulham are between the Premier League and the Championship, but Brighton were a yo-yo club between the Championship and League One. But in 2009 is where this story takes a massive turn. Tony Bloom, a boyhood Brighton fan and a professional poker player, took over the club, acquiring a 75% stake for £93 million. First port of call was to finalise the stadium plans and built a new stadium, which we now know as the Amex Stadium, which Brighton currently play their football in. It's a magnificent stadium, I'm not even gonna lie. The capacity of the Amex is 30,000, so can we try hit 300 likes on this video? That would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, Bloom injected £90 million in the club when they were in League One, taking a huge personal financial risk at the time, but his job is being a poker player, so I guess it's pretty normal for him to take massive risks, and that's why football ownership really suits our Tony. In the 2010-2011 season under Gus Poyet, they won the league with 95 points, with a certain Glenn Murray firing them up with 22 goals in that season. In their first 3 seasons back in the Championship, they got to the playoffs twice, losing to Crystal Palace and my club Derby County in 2014. I honestly really believed that year we would go up, but no, Bobby Zamora scored against us and my club's been in turmoil ever since. And if you feel bad for me, then will you please leave me a pity, subscribe and like. However, the season after was an absolute disaster for the club. At Christmas time, they were in the relegation spots and had a new manager in Sami Hyypiä, ex-Liverpool legend. The season after the 2015 season was an absolute disaster for Brighton. They were playing some awful football and were actually in the relegation spots at Christmas time. They had a new manager in ex-Liverpool legend Sami Hyypiä, and he wasn't cutting the mustard. He got sacked in December, and then Tony Bloom made one of the best decisions of his life. He hired Chris Hughton on New Year's Eve in 2014, and his first #1 priority was to survive, and Chris Hughton guided the team to safety, with hometown hero Lewis Dunk scoring some crucial goals that season. He notched up 7 in the league. The next season, Chris Hughton's side, spearheaded by Tom Hamer, narrowly missed out on automatic promotions on goal difference, and then they lost to Sheffield Wednesday in the playoffs. Absolutely heartbreaking. Now, there were questions over Brighton at this time. Would there be a playoff hangover? Because that is a usual thing. Just look at Huddersfield last season, playoff finalists, almost relegated this season. But there was no playoff hangover, as Brighton came second that next season and secured Premier League football for the first time in their history. Once they reached the Premier League, they would be guaranteed £100 million+ a season. With Bloom, he's made all his money back and more. So what was the objective for the next few seasons? Well, it was very simple: survive. It was always going to be a tough task, playing against the likes of Chelsea, Man City, Manchester United. For the first season in the Premier League, Brighton finished 15th with 7 points away from the relegation zone, and during that summer, Bloom decided to actually buy another club, Belgium's second tier club at the time called Union Saint-Gilloise, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. Brighton enjoyed the next few years as they stayed in the Premier League, finishing 17th, 15th and 16th, and they became established as a bottom tier tier Premier League side, raking in £100 million each season. However, Bloom was not ready to settle for mediocrity, and he made another huge decision and another huge gamble. Chris Hughton, who was a fan favourite at the time, got the sack in May 2019, and there was a massive fan outrage when this happened, as he guided them to their best footballing period in the club's history. Many predicted Brighton to go down, but Bloom had a vision of what a Brighton team would look like, and under Chris Hughton, he didn't quite see that coming to fruition. Bloom imagined Brighton as a young, hungry, progressive footballing side, and under Chris Hughton, while they were still in the Premier League and surviving, they were relying on older, experienced players, and the football wasn't really that pleasant to watch. So Bloom took a huge gamble and went and got one of the best up-and-coming coaches in English football at the time, and that man was Graham Potter, who was at Swansea, and they had just missed out on the playoffs in the Championship. And in Potter's first summer, he oversaw the signings of Adam Webster, a left winger by the name of Leandro Trossard, and a young Argentine midfielder. You may have heard of him before. His name is Alexis McAllister. And during this time, Bloom had implemented a completely new way of scouting players. He used analytical data research to flag up players in obscure leagues who Brighton could sign for a relatively cheap price. If these players played well, they'd sell them on for a huge profit. But if these players didn't turn out like they hoped for, then they sell them for a few £1,000,000 and maybe take a marginal loss. However, the risk to reward ratio on this was extremely low. This transfer policy has overseen the players signing like Moises Caicedo, who they signed from his home country of Ecuador for £4.5 million. They then made a 2,500% profit on him when they sold him to Chelsea. And with this new way of scouting, Brighton very rarely got it wrong, and this ended up seeing Graham Potter's side finishing 9th in the league. They were so close to those European spots. They had a great team full of youngsters, and they were a joy to watch. But the best part about Brighton is, when their players are eventually sold, they have a rare ability to sign better players for a lot cheaper. For example, when they lost Marc Cucurella to Chelsea, they cost £60 million, and their replacement for him, Pervis Estupiñán, who right now is one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League. They've been able to do this consistently with replacing players like Ben White with Joel Veltman for £1,000,000, replacing Leandro Trossard for Cairo Mitoma, who's arguably a better player, and they only signed Mitoma for £3 million. Bargain of the century, if you ask me. And this consistency of being able to buy low and sell high has seen Brighton make a profit of £160 million over the past 2 summers with huge sales. But it's not just players that Brighton buy low and sell high for. It includes managers as well, when they sold Graham Potter for £30 million to Chelsea. And then Bloom pulled an absolute masterstroke by getting Roberto De Zerbi from Shakhtar, who's arguably a better manager than the aforementioned Graham Potter. And it showed as Potter only lasted a few months at Chelsea. But that might be because they're a basket case of the club and spending £1 billion on players. But Brighton have gone from strength to strength and have shown that they are masters of the transfer market. Remember Union Saint-Gilloise that I spoke about earlier? Well, Brighton have also massively helped them, as they loaned them players who are close to the Brighton first team but not quite ready yet. The best example of this was Cairo Mitoma, who went on loan there for a season, and also Simon Adingra, who is an absolute baller, and both Mitoma and Adingra are set to become Premier League superstars. When Bloom invested in Union, they were in the 2nd tier of Belgian football, and that was in 2019. 3 years later, they win the Belgian First Division title in 2022. Their rise has arguably been even better than Brighton's, but by acting as an affiliate club to Brighton, it has helped both clubs thrive on and off the pitch. Brighton's best youngsters get crucial game time, while Union are in and around Europe and are now a Belgian top division side. Smaller clubs like Brighton do get bullied and picked on by the bigger clubs, as they always try to hoover up the best talent in the league. I'm looking at you, Chelsea. But one of the best things about Brighton is they are not afraid of getting bullied. And this has seen them hold out for high prices, and the players kind of just get along with it. But because they set such high prices, the buying club just seems to pay it. Tony Bloom has also spent a lot of money re-revolutionising the academy, signing some of the brightest talent around the world, and the most recent success has been in the Irish leagues, especially with the meteoric rise of Evan Ferguson, who looks set to be the next £100 million £1 player to potentially leave Brighton. At 18 years of age, he's genuinely scary at how good he can become. Made his debut at 15 for Bohemians and then was snapped up straight away by Brighton. And he's not looked back, really. Their under-18s finished 6th last year in the under-18s Premier League. And their under-21s also finished 6th last year in the Premier League too. And that's shown with there currently being 4 academy graduates with an... Tony Bloom has also invested a lot in the academy. And it shows as they've got 4 academy graduates in and around the first team. And lots more are flourishing out on loan, whether that be in the Championship or in and around Europe. The pathway to the first team at Brighton is very, very clear for these young players. And at the moment, there's probably no better club to be at if you are a young aspiring footballer. With the constant faith in youth and a progressive coach in Roberto De Zerbi, I think Brighton could potentially challenge for the top 6 in the future. With 12 players out of the 25 under the age of 23 and signing Barcelona's number 10 Ansu Fati on loan, I think the only way is up for Brighton. Tell me where you guys see Brighton within the next 5 years, and watch this video about the astonishing rise of Newcastle United, who coincidentally Brighton beat 3-1 the other day. Make sure you like and subscribe as well if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.